Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below telling us who your favorite playwright is, your favorite play, your best, most favorite thing about playwriting, or even just to say hi, because apparently it helps our algorithm. Be sure to share this video with a friend if you have a playwright in your life or an actor or director who you think would benefit from this video. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is an award-winning playwright with productions off-Broadway and regional theaters nationally. His productions include the world premieres of Tracy Jones at Williamston Theatre, Michigan, and CenterStage, Rochester, and the world premiere of Branwell and the Other Brontes, an autobiography edited by Charlotte Brontë at Loft Ensemble, Los Angeles. His play Tracy Jones is a finalist for B Street Theater's new Comedies Festival in Sacramento, California, and was a finalist for the ScreenCraft Stage Play Contest and the Trustus Playwrights Festival. He is a 2021 Individual Artist Fellowship winner in Playwriting from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. He earned his BFA from NYU Playwrights Horizons Theatre School and his MFA from Point Park University. He is a member of the Dramatists Guild and serves as Northeastern Regional Representative on the Dramatists Guild National Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen Kaplan.
Hey,
how are you, sir? Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
In person.
In person,
so
exactly.
You live where?
I live in New Jersey,
okay.
About 10 minutes over the George Washington Bridge, but grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which is basically the equivalent of New Jersey. So
sure.
It's like I never left.
Does Jersey have a strong, do they have a strong theater community, or do you just kind of go back into New York?
Well, it's interesting. For a while, I was the New Jersey regional rep for the Dramatists Guild, and when they first asked me to do that, I said I don't really know New Jersey theater, and kind of in my my tenure there, I really learned about the different theaters that are around New Jersey, and I always think of us like we're like the redheaded stepsister to New York, and a lot of people think that you have to go over the river for everything, because there's not really a theater town in New Jersey. You go to Princeton to go to the McCarter Theater, not just for theater in general. There's a lot of great theater artists. There's a lot of great theaters doing great work. I wish more people would think about New Jersey as its own entity and not just lumping us with our neighbors, to Philadelphia and New York.
Do you study playwriting for both your undergrad and your graduate?
Yeah, I always joke my undergrad was at Tisch, and I actually started at Northwestern and then transferred to NYU and Playwrights Horizons Theatre School. But I always joked I was a triple threat because I focused on musical theater performance as well as playwriting and directing. And kind of my whole life was trying to figure out, do I want to act? Do I want to direct? Do I want to write? And kept playing with each of them, and writing is the one. I mean, I still love directing, I still love acting, but writing is the one that stuck and has made the most sense just kind of with my life.
What was the program like? Like, what did you walk away with?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it was the best training for me, and I think every writer should act, every writer should direct, every director should act, because I feel like I'm a stronger writer because I understand those things. When I'm writing, I have a sense of what it's like to be an actor, and and hopefully writing parts that are playable, that have depth. I try not to direct on the page when I'm writing, but I have a sense of possibilities. And Playwrights was really great about that because we got a little bit of everything. How do you
prevent what would you say qualifies as directing on the page, and then how do you prevent doing that?
What I tell my students, directing on the page is pretty much anytime you use stage right, stage left, specifying with your set location, doing a little bit what Eugene O'Neill does and pretty much a parenthetical for every single line. That's what I call directing on the page, where it's kind of, it's almost more like novel writing, and and I think early playwrights do that a lot. They think that's, because they have a clear picture in their head, and you should have a clear picture, but you also, theater is a collaborative art form. And so, leaving room for things is so much more exciting and part of the process.
How detailed do you get in your stage directions?
I hate stage directions. It's the, it's the reason why I can't write prose. It just, anytime I ever try to write anything with prose, I'm like, let me get to the dialogue and people talking to each other. I try to specify, the basics. Where are we? What are they doing? I have hopefully a sense of kind of if a line could be interpreted in a couple different ways to try to clarify with that. But again, stage directions are my least favorite thing to do.
When you said with the line of dialogue and you try to clarify with that, can you give an example of how you might do that?
Sure. I mean, it's again, I try to be clear enough in the dialogue itself, but if I think, someone could play that, I definitely want it to be sarcastic and it's not necessarily clear on the page and there's not a way for me to specify, I'll do those adverbs, sarcastically. When you open
a scene and you're in a specific location, like how detailed do you get into that?
Not very. I mean, I try to. I probably less than I probably should be doing. I try to specify time of day, basic location, but I don't describe furniture. I don't describe. It's. I try to create place more just with what's happening in the space. My opening stage directions tend to be pretty limited for the most part. Sometimes if there's a lot of action and things that are happening, I'll describe that, if a character is doing something, but as far as describing setting, it's very, very limited.
A conversation, apparently I have this issue with my current play, but it was a conversation that came up a couple episodes ago, is making each of your characters sound distinct. How do you achieve that? They all sound like me a little bit because I think, we write ourselves. For me, it actually comes back to the acting training and my background where I know, they talk about this a lot in TV film writing, doing like a pass on the script, kind of like a character pass. And I try to do that while I'm writing and thinking about each character as I'm writing and if I can, as an actor, make them distinct enough and understand them, hopefully, usually, then their voices, separate. It's funny, whenever I'm reading a play, I tend to read really fast, and the mark of a good play for me is if I can read the play and not have to look at who's the character names, and get a clear sense of, I know who's talking because I know what they sound like. So I try to do that with my own writing. And you said you teach playwriting as well?
Yeah.
What are some of the common mistakes, or I hate to say mistakes because it's just, and I don't want to say flaws either, but habits, bad habits.
Habits and the pitfalls, I think, that sometimes come in. A lot of times again, I think not overwriting, directing on the page, I think, is something. Like you said, characters that sound alike, and really kind of what I find, especially with early playwrights, is them forgetting that it's something that's meant to be on stage. And it's not that, I was taught early on, thinking about kind of, what stories can be told on stage and what stories can be told on film. And I actually think any story can be told in either of those, but it's just how you tell that story. You can tell Titanic on film and you can tell Titanic on stage, and it just has to do with how you're telling that story. So I think, and I think what happens with a lot of early playwrights, one of the pitfalls and one of the it's a bad habit, but they forget that, and they forget the theatricality of it. And I'm always trying to push them to remember that we're going to be watching this, and that it's something that is going to be alive. And so how do you put that on the page to, you could have a car chase. You can do that. You just remember how is that going to happen, which I think, again, is part of the directing training that I had too, to think about. You can do any of those things, but it's just figuring out, okay, well, what's the theatrical stage version of that versus, 5 cars, actually we see them, unless we see little tiny cars. I don't know, there's lots of ways to do pretty much anything.
Sure. So I'm assuming this is like a semester long class.
Yeah.
So where do you start, and then by the end of the course, where have you finished?
Usually what I do with, depending on kind of the level that I'm working with, I love working with 10-minute plays, as especially for beginning playwrights, because if you can craft the structure of a 10-minute play is the same as the structure of a full-length play, just it's a little bit longer. And if you can kind of crack that in 10 minutes, I feel like that unlocks for students a lot of, I know how to do this. So I do start off with a lot of, before we get to even writing any play, lots of different exercises. I love the idea of just vomiting on the page and giving my students. I love working with a lot of boundaries with them. So for I'll do the exercise where, I'll say pick a letter of the alphabet, and they'll pick a letter, and I say, okay, that's the first line is going to start with that letter, and then you're just going through the alphabet, and those restrictions, can often free them. And each exercise I then explain afterwards why I did it. I think that was actually something that I missed in a lot of my playwriting training, is I'd get these exercises and I'm going, okay, I have a character acting like an animal. Why am I doing that? And I had to figure it out on my own. So I always try to, usually afterwards, explain, this is what was the point of this exercise. Like I do a subtext exercise with them where they will, two people want the same thing, or want something, but that can never ever be talked about in your scene. And so they do that and they kind of don't know why, and then explain it, and then usually that then somebody understands, hopefully.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because it was interesting. I'm glad that you brought that up, because there was a question that I brought up in a past episode. I don't remember who the guest was, but I asked if you can teach subtext. So it sounds like you can. So expand on that a little bit more.
I think it's it's this magical thing when it does happen, and I think as actors we love that, when that happens. But it's really just recognizing, with subtext, what's underneath the text, what's happening underneath everything, and to as a playwright to remember that as you're working on a scene. Again, and every scene doesn't have subtext. I know there are a lot of playwrights. Once they learn that, you should have subtext, every scene has subtext, and I have no idea what's happening here. We need some sort of, compass for us, and key. And there are some times that I simply say, I need your pencil. I don't, circumvent, or circumlocute, whatever the topic, but to recognize that as a tool. And again, going back to the training I got at Playwrights Horizons, the thing that I loved about that training also was, even with the acting training, it was, we learned a little Strasberg, we learned a little, Adler, we learned a little of everything. And it was the analogy or metaphor that we were given was this idea of a toolbox. And sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need a hammer. It's the same thing, it's a spice cabinet. Sometimes you need some cinnamon, but if you only know, and I know some playwrights that only know how to use cinnamon, and I'm like, okay, that's it. And every scene has that thing in it. And it's the same thing with subtext. You need to know how to play with it, and that it's a great thing to have. And that what's exciting for an audience oftentimes is, the dramatic irony of we know what's happening, and then, even the character doesn't. And subtext has a lot to do with that.
What do you think should be in every playwright's toolbox?
I think the essence is their own voice is actually the biggest thing that should be in every writer's toolbox, and that is the thing that I think is missing in a lot of writers, meaning that they forget that they're the only one of them, and that to trust that, and to not simply try to write what they think other people are going to respond to, or what they think their voice should be. One of the things that I love about teaching so much is I feel like my job is simply just to get every one of my students to recognize that they have their own voice and that they should be using it. And so that's the big thing in every writer's toolbox. I think it should be just the recognition of their own voice and embracing that.
Are there any other things that should be in there as well? Or are the things that, like, oh gosh, why I wish I would have known that when I was starting off? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things just, sort of, I feel like come, not naturally, but, eventually, like,
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I think, every writer should, I think, have a sense of, I actually don't want to say anything, because I feel like there are exceptions to every rule. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. You mentioned structure, starting off with 10-minute plays and expand. So what do you feel that is the structure of a play? I mean, you can read Save the Cat when it comes to screenwriting, and you can get a good basis of structure from that. But when it comes to a play, it's quite a bit different. So
it is, and I don't think every play is actually necessarily the same. I think that's also the cinnamon problem, kind of like, where there are some playwrights that every single one of their plays I know, by this point I'm going to know this thing, at this point I know that. And I think it's really that the play will often dictate the structure. Even in the different plays that I've written, the structure shift, and they should. You're going to look at a Durang play very different than a Pinter play. The big thing that every play should have, there should be some sort of conflict. There should be some sort of characters wanting things, and I've heard in a bunch of different people, so I don't actually know who to attribute to. But the other thing that every play should do structurally too is it shouldn't bore you. I
would hope not.
I would hope not, and yet many do.
Yeah.
So there's not really a. Even thinking about playwriting too. About filmmaking, and Save the Cat or Sid Field or however these structures go. I just saw Licorice Pizza on the plane flying out here, and that doesn't really follow that. But and there's certain elements to it, but it's not the act one, and then there's a bit of the dark night of the soul, all these things, but it's. I think that's exciting when people can subvert structure and play with it, and so I do teach in the 10-minute play some basic structure, just that by, we open up with the world in some sort of status quo, so we understand where we're coming from. That could be a page, it could be, the opening moment. We need to, change that status quo, or the status quo needs to be challenged. And then, things get complicated for the characters. That's the act one, get your character in a tree. Act two, get your, throw the rocks at the character. Act three, get them out of the tree. I do follow that as a basic structure, just because, I think the majority of plays follow that. And if you can do that, then you can start almost breaking the rules and playing with them.
Can you expand a little bit more on that? Getting them in a tree, throwing rocks, getting them out?
Yeah, it's, I want to say it's not George Bernard Shaw. It's, I'm blanking now. The George Kaufman? George Kaufman. The other George. Some George. Maybe not even a George. But I think it came from them, the idea that your first act, which is, if you're looking at any kind of structure, it's the first section of your play or your piece. And you're getting a character in a tree, meaning that there's a problem, and it's the other thing that I look at with that is the Passover question of why is this night different from all other nights? So, we don't necessarily climb a tree every single day, in the way I look at it. So there's some sort of problem. There's something that they're either escaping from or avoiding or going to some place different, if you look at it that way, whether it's metaphorically or physically. So you get them into something that seems a little bit different than their just ground level. Then you make things even more complicated. And that act two is you throw rocks at them. You make it difficult for them to be there. And they have to figure out what to do. If I'm hit by that, how do I avoid that? They, usually they're either trying to, avoid these rocks. Sometimes they like it. I don't know. And that's usually the second act, where complications ensue and you're things, and that as an audience we respond to, that we got, oh gosh, I hope that I'm not that person up in that tree. And we also, there's a bit of sadomasochism in all of us, the schadenfreude of, we like watching this happen. It comes from the Greeks and watching Oedipus, suffer. And then, so we make things as difficult as possible in that second act. And then in the third act, we need to figure out basically, okay, we need to get them out of the tree, and they're either returning to where they were before, learning something new, or they come down out of the tree, but something has changed in some way. They've been changed by these rocks, by everything thrown at them.
What do you think is the most important element of playwriting?
Most important element. I'm going to go back to voice. that and having something to say, and recognizing and trusting your thing to say. I think that I joke that if I wasn't a playwright, I probably would have been a rabbi, which is basically the same thing. You're telling stories, sometimes very weird stories, to people oftentimes sitting in front of you. For me, the job of a rabbi and the job of a playwright is to get your audience or your congregation to leave the service or leave the play with something different, learning something about their lives. And I think that the essence and the core of playwriting is storytelling and a reason behind that, to affect an audience in some way. And it doesn't need to be pedantic. It doesn't need to be even, if it's hitting the nail on the head, it's a little bit sometimes too obvious. I like for an audience to do a little bit of work and to question. And I think that would be for me kind of the core element of any play and playwriting.
Do you think that plot is necessary? Can you write a play without plot?
I think people like to say they can, and they try to, but there's always some kind of plot. It may not be linear. It may not be may not hit us on the most obvious level. I think by human nature, we construct plot and we construct story out of what's given to us. One of the first things that I'll show my students, we'll read Samuel Beckett's play Breath, which is a page long, and there's nobody on stage, and it's like you're looking at a bunch of trash. The play is, it opens, there's a bunch of trash on stage. You hear the inhale of a breath. You hear, it's like a baby crying. Then you hear the exhale, and the lights go up and down with that, and that's the end of the play. And so, and my students look at me and they're going, "What is this?" But the idea behind that there was like showing is a play. Something has happened. It may not be on the most obvious, but it's something has happened. There has, and even without, because I always say also, do you have to have actors on stage? Do you have to have a set? Do you have what do you need to have theater? And they always give you need costumes. You need these. I'm like, no, really, you need somebody to tell the story in some way and somebody to receive it. And plot is a great element, but it's even with, if you go back to Aristotle, it's one of many elements. It's not the only element, but I think even in something like Breath, we will still construct some sort of plot with it. Beckett may have, looking me down from wherever he is right now and going, there's no plot there. But for me, I feel like there is some sort of plot.
Sure. Was that the Poetics? Was that Aristotle?
Aristotle, yeah.
Yeah, and what do you remember what those are offhand?
Oh yeah, I teach them. Now my students are watching or listening. Okay, so there's it's plot, theme, diction, spectacle. Now I'm going to the music, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting one of them. Is there 6? I'm stressed out now.
It happens.
I'm on summer break, so I'll review it in a couple weeks.
every episode, somebody gets not thrown
character.
There we go.
Woo!
It never fails. I always put somebody on the spot, and let's because this is the first time it's come up, and I think this is episode 21, 22. So let's have some fun with Poetics. Can we break these down?
Oh my gosh! Okay, now
we don't have to go into huge detail, but yeah. I think that they're important elements. As we go back into playwriting, where that's what this is about. I think that these are important things that we can discuss.
Yeah, and they're all, and I think, and there are some tools. I think some people are, based on basically Aristotle. Looked at he was using Oedipus actually as one of the perfect plays, and he was removed. I'm not going into my theater history of all of it right now, but he was looking at kind of and this was for drama technically. There's a whole other rules for comedy that has been lost to us, but for drama basically there were these 6 elements that plot, like we were talking about before, things happening. character. Again, this is the very bare bones basic version of it. There are, things that the people that it's happening to, and having characteristics and the characters wanting things. Diction is partially the things that they're saying. Has to do a lot with, again, with look at Greek plays and how things were structured that way. But in kind of word choice, in when you were asking before, talking about how your characters talk differently, and diction can fall into that a little bit. Music, something that we actually don't talk about very much anymore. There was a lot, especially in Greek plays, music in the chorus that would come in and sing, but the way that I try to talk about that and teach that is going a little bit alongside diction, but the musicality of a play,
right, sure.
Rhythm has a lot to do with that, so looking things that way. Theme, a little bit kind of what I was talking about before about the voice, but something to say. Idea is often called theme, another way of looking at that are in the Poetics. And then final spectacle, which Aristotle often commented as being the least important, meaning, kind of the things that we see on stage. When I first started teaching, I always talked about, the chandelier and Phantom of the Opera, and a lot of musicals sometimes being very much about spectacle and low on some other things.
Miss Saigon,
that helicopter. But I think that neglecting spectacle, kind of going back to what I was saying before at the very beginning, is a problem. There's not that we go to the theater to it's great to see these amazing things happen, but spectacle can also be, it doesn't have to be set, things. It doesn't have to be the literal Deus ex machina, coming in from the heavens on this thing. We go to the theater to, we go to see a play. We don't say, oh, I'm going to go hear a play tonight. We go to see a play. And so the visual element of that, I think, it is often neglected with spectacle. I think there are some plays that are all spectacle or more spectacle, and that can be very cool. But and finding the balance with those things. So that's the brief dummy's guide to Aristotle and the Poetics.
No, that's great. That's great. You use that term, the Greek term, that always happens at the end of plays. Not always. How do you say it again? Because I will always butcher it.
Again, don't quote me. This is I was Deus ex machina.
Perfect. And what is that?
So literally, it's God from the machine or God of the machine, and a lot of Greek plays, excuse me, would end with all these conflicts, all these things happening, and then suddenly Apollo arrives, and comes and saves the day and puts everything in order. And the Greeks had a machine, basically, kind of a not a crane necessarily. Oh God, not the ropes. It's here I am. We're both in the same thing. We both draw blanks. Oh gosh, darn it. The pulleys. The pulley system. Yeah, something. Yeah. Some sort of way that this God would appear and put everything in order. And that is something that most playwriting teachers and people talk about. You want to avoid. Somebody else coming in to fix everything. Do you find that beginning playwrights still? Not necessarily. Honestly, beginning playwrights sometimes, in a good way, they're not even thinking about another character suddenly coming in to do that. I will sometimes say it's not necessarily another character, but it's an event that happens. It's something you go, that just came out of nowhere. It wasn't integrated into earlier. It's not the most. It does sometimes happen. But for me, when I talk to them about that, what I usually find it's something that just. It's kind of like suddenly on, page 8, I finally realized, oh, this is how I'm going to fix it. And you're going, you need to kind of have that woven in a little bit earlier. Classic. Do you think there are rules in playwriting? Yes and no. I mean, again, the biggest rule, I think, don't bore your audience. I'm someone, and I think, again, kind of like I said before, the idea that traditional structure, looking at Aristotle and Poetics, looking at the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 structure. They're good rules, but there are many, many exceptions. And I think that sometimes the plays that excite me most are the writers that are playing with that and that, but still find a way to make it work. And I love going to see a show. My favorite thing is and forgetting that I'm watching something and stopping, analyzing it. It's like when I started teaching screenwriting, and I tell my students all the time, like, you're gonna really pissed off watching movies now, because suddenly 20 minutes, why, something's happening, something's gonna happen right now. Oh, here it's the end of our act 2, really bad things are happening. Like but a really good movie, a really good play, you forget about that, and you're just wrapped into the world of the writer, and that for me is really, that's why I love still going to the theater when playwrights can do that.
I got into it with a friend. We were doing a movie review podcast, and I got into it. We were talking about Iron Man, and we got into this huge discussion of that it's formulaic, that all those movies, like, when something's going to happen. They're like, and he tried to compare it to playwriting. Like, no, this is completely different. You cannot compare this Shakespeare to the MCU. It just doesn't. But one of the in that regard, as far as rules, because I don't know if there's a book about playwriting that will cover everything. But one of the best things that I've ever been told, and this is more screenplay writing, but I think it applies to playwriting as well, is that read the books, grab Save the Cat, read it, throw it away.
Yeah,
there's no right or wrong way. They're good structure things, and learn the rules, and then break them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, So the way that I teach acting is very Stanislavski based. He was Konstantin Stanislavski was kind of considered one of the founders or fathers of creating an acting method, and very objective based. The idea that we want something, and my acting teachers taught me how do you break down a scene and figure out beat by beat, what a beat when your objective changes, and okay, well, what's my objective, and then what are my actions or tactics to achieve that. And I teach that to my students, and they, when we do it for mostly scene work, and then they ask me, well, do I do this for a full play, for every single play I do? No, at a certain point it gets instinctive, and that's, I think, the same thing with any of these with structural things. You can write a play following very clearly, any book, any structure, and that's great to learn, because and then it just starts getting in your muscle memory, and it's like when you first learn how to type, you're typing really, really slow, and then suddenly it just becomes instinctive, and you don't think about it anymore, and you start incorporating your own, what makes, how can I just bring myself to it, and then that's the perfect fusion then of us learning from our teachers and then bring our own self to it.
Well, I think the other thing to go in that regard as well is I think that you gotta use what works for you.
Completely. Yeah.
Sorry about the helicopters. That's coming around. It's really loud, and I got this window open. Hopefully, so we don't bake. Oh, geez. I just want to let it just linger. But because I went through Meisner, and Meisner just doesn't work for me. It's just like I take what you learn from it and run with it. And if it doesn't work for you, then pick something else up that does.
Exactly. I think any person, any actor, any director, anybody, any artist that subscribes to, well, there was one way to do it, that's extremely limiting. That's funny, because the school that I went through for Meisner, it was very brainwashed in that aspect. It basically was like, if you don't study here, you're never going to make it. And I think that's a crock, because I feel like for some people that, yes, it worked, but Meisner or any method does not work for every story. You're not going to approach, Beckett or Pinter or Neil Simon or Adrian Kennedy. You're not going to approach those things, the same way, and the same way that you're not going to write a play the same way every single time. Or if you do, I feel like the people that are writing kind of the same thing over and over again are eventually get bored with it, or hopefully they do, or we get bored with it.
Yeah. Are there playwrights that inspire you, that you borrow from? I don't want to say steal from, but
yeah, well, I steal and borrow and inspire hugely. I mean, John Guare is for me does the great. Like if I could write like John Guare, that's my dream. Where House of Blue Leaves for me is one of the best plays. It's. I remember seeing I had a VHS copy of it from American Playhouse, the Broadway revival, original Broadway revival, and funniest, weirdest, quirkiest, and then devastating at the very end. And for me, John Guare is one of my heroes. And 6 Degrees of Separation, similarly, those are two of my favorite plays. Christopher Durang was one of my favorites, and Martin McDonagh. I cannot write like Martin McDonagh, but anything I've ever seen of Martin McDonagh's, I love humor, but I love the danger that he plays with and his characters, and I'm not nearly as dark as Martin McDonagh, but I've always been inspired by him. Adrian Kennedy, I mentioned before, she, Funny House of the Negro, and movie star Dreams in Black and White. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking the name of the title of the play. Again, we were talking about plot before. There's plot in them, but they're so theatrical and even if I'm not following it all the time, there's something. So I do try to steal from pretty much any play or playwright that I do. Those are kind of the 4 big ones that first come to mind.
What do you? Because I'll read things as well, and it's sometimes intimidating, but I'm trying to figure out what their secret is. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if you can, I think if you can distill the secret, then they're actually probably doing something wrong. Sure. Because then you've nailed it. You're like, oh, well, that's the secret sauce in there. Where it's kind of like Sam Hunter's plays. I just saw Case for the Existence of God. I think was just I'm blanking on titles right now. At Signature, and there's something about Sam Hunter's plays. I can name that, kind of the quality of the world, but there's something that I can't put my finger on, and you shouldn't be able to, because again, then I feel like then it's derivative, or then it's yeah, I don't know.
No, it's. I realized this a few months ago that Casablanca pisses me off because it's so frickin' brilliant. It's so well written, and you go through that dialogue, and then I know this is about playwriting, we know, but still, and you go through it, and I'm I can't fathom how they achieved the brilliance in this. It's just really, and I don't want to say it's subtext, but it's just, there's so much said about the characters and just with some of those exchanges of dialogue, and I just,
yeah.
Is there a play that you revisit and you're just that you've learned so much from, or this is just brilliant, and that you keep going back to try to?
Yeah, for me, I think again, it's House of Blue Leaves is for me the and I get a sense of what he's done, but the opening of House of Blue Leaves, it defies kind of anything else. It's the play opens and the main character is in a kind of piano bar, playing piano for this audience. It's maybe the first 8 to 10 minutes of the play. He's doing these songs, that he, and you get a sense of the character, and then we're never in that space again. We never have that happen again. We're suddenly in his apartment for the rest of the evening, and it's something going and every play should not open like that, but it feels perfect for that play. And anytime I look at that play, I think that for me, kind of, the thing that inspires me when I go to a play to learn from it is simply just to remind myself again, there's no one way to do it.
But how does he get away with that? Because, like, to me, if I were workshopping, so in a workshop, I was reviewing somebody's original piece, with high school students or the college students and stuff like that. When I do these things, my instinct would be like, what are you doing? We don't need this because we don't come back here. So why did you do that? Just this, this can go. But
yeah, and if one of my students brought that, I'd probably say the same thing. I'd probably say like, and the producer, it's not necessarily a different set. It's a very simple you could do, but why don't we get right to the action? But the thing that it does so much for the play, and by taking it out, you're actually losing something.
No, 100%. I'm just kind of curious how you get away with that.
Well, how do you get any Tony Kushner, 8 hours of Angels in America. Like, you're doing 2.5 hours. You do it. It's kind of and having the the cojones to just kind of go, I think that this works, and to trust that. And thank God. You talk about workshopping too. I mean, that's I think have been a big problem with plays that we, I don't know how many times House of Blue Leaves was workshopped.
Sure.
Probably not. And you do learn things from an audience. That is true. But also being able to just at a certain point go, I think that's why John Guerra is great, because he trusted that's going to work. Now, every John Guerra play is not good. There's some plays that are not great, but the faith in your voice is and kind of going, what, I think this works. Yeah, I think that if I was a teacher, I probably would have told that to my students. So I'm glad he wasn't one of my students.
All right, so we brought up voice a couple times. Can you expand on that? What makes your voice? Because you've got, let's say you've got 2 characters, 3, you got 8, who all have their own voices. So when you say
I think
your voice,
there's a difference between the characters' voices and
sure.
Obviously, and and it comes down to going back to the Poetics, the idea of idea or theme, versus diction or character, and idea or theme is for what I think about as your voice as the writer. You're using all of the tools. You're using your characters to tell this, but it when it comes down to it, I think about your voice as just being, why are you writing this play? Why are you even writing a play? There's so many ways to express your thoughts, and to seize upon that, and what we're talking about with John Guerra and all these plays, is the confidence in that. I am not a visual artist. It's not how I express myself. It's not, if I'm drawing something, like, no one wants to play Pictionary with me because, it's like, it's a stick figure doing the same thing for every single thing. But we go to visual artists who claim that as their voice, their way of communicating to other people. There's something in Renoir. There's just something in a Keith Haring. That those are very different voices.
Sure.
And then finding their way to do that. So for me, when I think about kind of the author's voice or your voice as a playwright, is first of all figuring out, why are you writing plays? Some people maybe should not, I should not be painting pictures. I know that about myself. But if I suddenly went, I want to express myself through visual means, then figuring out, why is this the medium that I'm using? And as a playwright, to ask yourself that, why am I writing this play? Why am I writing it as a play? What do I want to say? And then trusting that I'm going to get it out there, and having faith and confidence in pushing that out there.
Do you think that playwrights have a distinct voice to where you think, like, in my head as we've talked about this, I'm like, look, obviously Danny Elfman has a very distinct voice in music. Like when you hear a Danny Elfman thing, it's Danny Elfman. Yeah. Same thing with John Williams. It never fails. Do you think that playwrights have that same thing? Like if you were sitting down and you didn't know who wrote it, but you read it, do you think you could determine, this is a so and so, this is a such and such?
I think there's elements of that. there's some. It's funny because someone was asking me. People ask me a lot, kind of like, I talk about voice a lot, and they're like, well, what's your voice as a writer? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how I define it for myself. I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, I go back to the rabbi thing of like, I feel like my voice is. I love language. The kind of, I love playing with language. I love the power of language and words, and that carries through in pretty much all of the plays that I write. But like I have two plays that have been going on recently. Tracy Jones, which is set in the back party room of like a wings joint, and it's contemporary.
Well, a wings joint, like
buffalo wings.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it's set in the back of
an airport.
It's at the Jones Street Bar and Grill, the place for wings and things. So there's that world, and then I have a play called Branwell and the Other Brontes,
which I kept saying Bromwell. I'm so sorry.
My God, he's dead. He'll forgive you. Which is about the Brontë family, and it's set in the 1800s. But they're, and even though they're very, very different, I think that someone looking at those two plays for me gets a sense of, well, this is a playwright that enjoys language. That I have characters that like to speak, that try to use words and language to communicate, and we're often frustrated by the limitations that we have in language. Both plays also have themes of and ideas of trying to connect with people and the importance of connection and individuality. But so even though on paper you're looking at I don't know, someone may go, Stephen Kaplan wrote these two plays. I think if you go to the DNA of them, if you do your 23andMe for all your plays, there's something that does connect all of them, and that's and I think that is voice as well, and understanding when you look at other playwrights, being able to, like a Martin McDonagh play, that DNA is in and it's in his films, and it's in everything that he does. They're not all the same, but there's an essence to that.
You mentioned language and the love of language. So how do you use that to your advantage? How do you manipulate it?
Yeah. My husband always jokes that he knows, he's like, in every draft I always have someone correcting someone else's grammar. So it's not just that, but that is a quick go-to that I always tend to people mishearing or correcting people. But I think even as now I'm trying to figure out, how to communicate this, for me, that's what all people are always trying to do. We're always trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way to do that? How do I communicate that? I've grown to start playing a lot more with pauses, with ellipses. I look at Susan Laurie Parks and how she uses ellipses for silences and thoughts. And so that is something I've stolen, and I think that for me makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's how we talk. We consider, we think about what we're going to say and trying to figure out the best way. And I often have characters that are doing that, and other characters that are misunderstanding it, or they've chosen the wrong word, even though or the wrong way to communicate that. So that's something that I play with, and I feel bad for actors because they often, for my plays, because my lines are often hard to learn, because, and I take it as a compliment because they say, because it seems so natural, like it's not, I can't figure out like the rhythm, not necessarily the rhythm, there's not a quick way to do it. So it's other than learning
pattern, maybe, or?
Pattern, perfect. Yeah. And, because I don't think we always talk in patterns. And so that's also what I play with.
Let's go with Branwell for a little bit. So you've got a period piece that's based on real historical characters. So how did you start? What first of all, what was the inspiration on tackling this? Because this is when you and I first met.
Right, yeah.
You've submitted to Play Noir a couple times, and then you were in town for this staged reading that they were doing over at the Blank, which I completely enjoyed. I was so really impressed, and I was a little jealous of Loft for getting to produce this play. I really wanted to do it myself.
You can do a revival. I'm there. Do more.
I just might. So, where where did the inspiration come from? And then what was the process? Because obviously you had to do some kind of digging, research and whatnot. And then how much creative license did you take? What was true? What was false?
Yeah.
And it's hard for people who haven't seen it, but still, in this regard, as far as the process goes.
Sure. Yeah. So it actually was my thesis play for my MFA at Point Park. And it came about, I'm not a Brontë file really much. I always joke, I saw Jane Eyre the musical on Broadway, and I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. And I think I read Wuthering Heights in high school, or I Cliff Notes it, or don't tell my teachers.
Yeah,
or my students.
Heathcliff Notes it?
Oh, very good.
Terrible.
That's good. But never was not a huge fan of it. But I knew about Charlotte and I knew about Emily, because I'd heard of them. I was introduced to a book called Hamlet on the Holodeck as part of the MFA program, because we're talking about nonlinear storytelling and how do you tell story when, for example, in a video game or in a theme park, how do we still create a catharsis, some sort of, moment and theatricality for an audience or a game player when there's not a linear structure. And there were 3 pages in the book, I want to say 3 or 4 pages about the Brontës and talking about their, when they were younger, these stories that they would tell, these worlds they would create, these plays that they would make. And a couple things stood out to me, and when I was reading those pages, I went, oh, okay, well, who's Branwell and who's Anne? I've never heard of these two. Branwell, they talked about was kind of sometimes the impetus and the link between all of them, and the one that pushed them to play these games a lot of times. And so I was curious about that, and then for me, I went, oh, that's what I did when I was little. I made up stories and I had forts and made my friends always do plays with me and created these worlds. And so that felt very, I understood that. I understood that in a way that I'm going, oh, what's the Moors and, all of this stuff. I'm like, I don't know what any of that is. And so I started researching a little bit, and Wikipedia was my friend initially, and I looked at Branwell and started just learning about and was fascinated by the idea of this forgotten member of the family who a lot of the sisters, it was kind of a very core element of all of them. And I started reading Daphne du Maurier, who wrote Rebecca and the Birds and all this. She has a biography she wrote about Branwell. So I started reading a little bit of that. But I actually started writing without having read all about his life and without having read all about their story. And I would write a few pages and then read a little bit and then write a few pages. And I got to this point where what I was writing then ended up happening in so it felt like I was being channeled in some way, if you believe that or whatever. But just that instinctively, I got a sense of who these people were or how I interpreted them. And things that I started reading were just fascinating to me about one of the most famous portraits of the 3 sisters, was painted by Branwell, and then he's actually in it, but then was removed in some way, and people don't know whether did he take himself out, did somebody else take him out.
Is that just speculation, or has an original been found, or did they do some DNA thing where they can see it?
You can see in the portrait now. I'm going to get the scientific term wrong, where they do the. It's not carbon tracing. It's where they, take a black light. I don't know, something like that, and you can see what this. You can see the outline. It's pretty amazing, and so that was fascinating to me. And also, just what I related to is, I think we've all felt. Well, I know I have felt like, why is everybody else so good at this, and why am I? I want to do this too. I want to be as good as all these other people, and doubting yourself. And I think that's a lot with Branwell. It was kind of like he was surrounded by these geniuses and wanted to be like them. And I've read, some of his writing, and it's not very good. I don't think it's very good, or it doesn't really, and yet he wanted it so badly. And there's something that was really sad to me, but also very relatable about, just feeling like, how do you deal with mediocrity when you're surrounded by geniuses? And that was kind of my way in. And I there's so much research out there about the Brontes. And I know that I got a lot of it not necessarily right. I know a lot of it is wrong. People say sometimes, maybe the way that I portray the characters, that, maybe Charlotte was the more flamboyant one than I can't remember what but for me, that wasn't how I wanted to tell the story.
Do you think that matters anyways?
No, I mean, because I'm not doing a biopic, and even if you're doing a biopic, it's going back to what I said before, it's meant to be on the stage and theater. And it's, I think that I'm true to the story that I wanted to tell. And going back to the rabbi thing, hopefully we'll get bombarded because I'm saying I don't know if everything in the Bible is true necessarily, but it's how things,
blasphemy.
But it's how it's how you're interpreting it. And I think that it's meant to be interpretive. And I think, I'm not writing a history book. I'm not writing a biography. I'm writing something for the theater. And it's the thing that excites me is a lot of people, after having seen the play, wanted to research more about them. And that's really cool that, that I excited somebody to kind of go, I want to find out more about why this is going on. And hopefully be moved by these people that, for me, I was never moved by. I never quite understood them.
So it's a period piece for that takes place in the 1800s. So how did you approach the dialogue in speaking in a not so modern?
Yeah, it's my own, and going back to how I like playing with language, it's how I imagine. I did not. I purposely did not do a deep dive into with even their writing, kind of and their voices, because I'm not writing their voices. I'm trying. It's heightened language, how I imagined heightened language that time.
Right.
And I did try to, at certain times.
Oh God, sorry about that. I just hit the camera.
No worries.
Leg cramp. Sorry.
At one point, I don't know if I can say, one of the characters calls another one a bitch at one point, and I had to look and see. Okay,
Shakespeare used it.
Shakespeare, exactly. I was like, wait, would someone have said that in this way? And how would that have? And who knows? But I'm not trying to be I purposely wasn't trying to be anachronistic throughout it. For me, kind of like it's meant to be, my way of looking at that world in that time period.
So you mentioned, why do you write a play? So what inspires you to sit down like, oh, this is going to be a play. This is what I need to write. How do you come up with your ideas, and then kind of what's your process from that?
Yeah. I don't remember where I learned it, but back step a second. I guess, I don't understand, for me, whenever somebody says, I don't know what to write about. Like, I have way too many things I want to write about. A number of years ago, I've always collected ideas, whether it's newspaper articles or magazine articles or images that I've seen or a line of dialogue I've heard, and I can't remember where I learned it or who maybe coined it, but I've stolen it, and I have a file on my computer that's literally called Brilliant Ideas, and it's important that you call it Brilliant Ideas. And I tell my students, one of the first things I make them do is create a file or called Brilliant Ideas, and just to list anything that inspires them and excites them. Because you never know when something's going to come up, and you have to say that they're brilliant, because if they're not so-so ideas, they're not okay ideas, they're brilliant, they're going to be the best ever. And for me, it's, I think with anybody, it's just what tickles you, it's just kind of, with the Brontes, like, I never intended to write anything about the Brontes. They were never on my radar. But, because of this book and them talking about kind of the stories they create, like that, there was something about that resonated with me. And I think it's, the tuning fork or whatever, kind of like for yourself, and trusting that, if there's something that excites me, hopefully it's going to excite somebody else. Because, and that's part of why, even if like I've been commissioned to something or someone I'm sure as a writer, you felt this too, they're like, oh my gosh, you need to tell this story, or wouldn't this be a great play? And most of the time going, I smile and nod. I'm like, not for me, not because it didn't, but there are times the things that do is like, well, how do I tell the story, and what is exciting to me about that? It's just being tuned into that and figuring what gets you excited.
Has anybody ever approached you with something like that and you're like, it's not for me, but then you read it and like, oh wow, that was actually really good?
Yeah, I'm sure it's happened. I'm not being a very good interview with me. I don't have a good story for any of that.
No, it's being put on the spot. I don't expect you to remember everything.
No, yeah, I mean and it's just timing, I'm trying to think of anybody that's come to me and said, usually if somebody else comes up with the idea first, it could be somebody introducing me to something. So for an example, of something that's excited me, it's a piece I'm working on. I don't know if it's a play. I don't know if it's a screenplay. I don't know if it's a novel. I don't know. But there's my next door neighbor growing up was a TV film actress, and she married basically British royalty, and we visited them at their castle, and the husband was telling me about one of his ancestors, this amazing life, and he was excited, and he said this would be a great something. I'm like, yeah, that would be really good. And so I've actually been researching more about this Earl who was gay, and and just the life, and so that is an example of somebody telling me a story and saying, I think this would be something like, yeah, that's cool.
So once you've come up with your idea, well, first of all, how do you achieve discipline?
I think having a 15-year-old it makes me have discipline. And having a family and having a full-time job, I teach as well as write, and I think all of those limitations have forced me to have discipline, because it's made me find times to write. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, no, yes. But I'm just gonna not push back. But all of those things would be reasons why everybody would be reasons why people don't.
Right. Yeah. I guess because it's something that I stopped writing for probably about 6 or 7 years. I wrote my first play when I was 15, and I was doing a musical theater pre-college program at Carnegie Mellon, and they had a playwriting elective you could take, and everybody else wrote like a 2-page skit, and I wrote a full one act that
a full opera,
and ended up like winning a bunch of young playwrights contests, and I'm like, oh, this is really easy, but then I started realizing, because I always wrote growing up, but I didn't write plays, but I just kind of kept writing, but I stopped writing for a while because everybody expected me to write, because people started calling me like, oh, you're the playwright, you're that, and it actually stopped, and I went, I don't really know what I have to say, and I felt like I was writing because everybody expected me to write, but then just about a year or two after my son was born, I started writing again, and I realized like this is how I need to communicate. It became something, so I'm actually glad I had that hiatus, because it taught me and it made me realize it's something really important to me. And it's when you're a writer, I think all artists have to do kind of a lot of artist statements, and when I'm applying for residencies or different kind of things, there's the why do you write, and I realized, like, as lofty as it is, it's part of my way of changing the world. It's my way of, going back to the rabbi thing of, it's the way that I understand how to best communicate with other people and hopefully make our world better. And when I don't write now, and I don't write every day, I don't write at the same time every day. Austin Kleon, who's a fantastic writer and has a great newsletter that everybody should subscribe to as well. He during the pandemic, he had a really great thing about the importance of, downloading versus uploading, that we don't always have to be uploading stuff, that downloading and reading books and listening to music and just being is really important. So I make sure I have time for that too, but I still need to write and I still need to find those things. So the discipline just comes from, I think the desire, and then kind of that's something I'm passionate about. And it's something that, I don't call it an addiction, but it's, but there's something about it that's like, I know when I haven't, my body doesn't feel right when I haven't written for a while. The same way that, a lot of times, if you've been eating really poorly or you've not exercised or whatever, like there's something for me that's just very much about like, I need to be doing this.
What was the newsletter? You just mentioned a newsletter. Is there a name of it? So I can make sure.
I'm going to blank. If you look up Austin Kleon, Kleon, he's written a bunch of great books, Steal Like an Artist, Keep Going, really, really fantastic, just inspiring writer, and encouraging other artists, and just there's always something. Every week he has a newsletter that he sends out, and there's always something in there that inspires me and that excites me.
Okay. Do you write linearly?
Yeah.
Do you have writing habits?
I do. I tend to. I pretty much every play of mine, the first things I write is the first scene. I have a sense of where I'm going usually. Maybe a sense of the ending. I cannot think of any play of mine that ended up being where I started wasn't where the play actually ended up starting. Maybe a few lines in or something like that, but it was always, there was always that moment. I've never gone back and went, well, the play I'm working on now, I just rearranged scenes, but it was there. But yeah, for me, I need to, I think about my plays like dominoes. And so for me to kind of hit a domino later in the row, to knock them down, it doesn't make any sense to me. Because there's so much that I set up early on that I feel like if I start in the middle, for me, I'm going to have to rewrite it a gazillion times anyway. But, there's something that doesn't, just the way my brain works.
Do you edit as you write, or do you just all the way through to the end and then go back?
I wish that I could just not edit. I've tried to be better about it and try to, let myself just vomit and be okay with that. I've gotten better about trusting, like, I'll fix that later. But again, kind of with that idea of the linear, there are times too that not that I make sure that the scene is perfect, but I make sure that it's like building a foundation for me for a house, and if I've built it on really tentative, the foundation, that doesn't feel right for me, and I know that the rest of the structure isn't going to work. So I do edit as I go along.
Are there tricks that you use just in writing as you go?
I don't know if I call them tricks. I mean, my son laughs at me when I'm writing. He'll often take pictures of me because I'm like often deep in thought, or I'm acting it out, and he'll mimic my sound sometimes. I mean, the trick for me, I guess, is just trying to live my play. Kind of living the characters and being in there, because it may be my acting background, but just to feel like it's my way of understanding it, and to get as deep into it. So I guess that's a trick. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know.
All right. Where was I going with this? Now I'm on the spot. I'm gonna jump ahead because I was gonna get to this eventually. But you actually been published by Dramatists.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what was that process?
I have one play right now that's published with Dramatists Play Service. It's a 10-minute play, and it actually came about through a friend, and who connected me to them. And it's in one of their compilations of outstanding short plays. I mean, so much of my career is based on connections, and more just connecting with people and people. Being a cheerleader for me, I try to be a cheerleader for others as well. But I think that that is so important, especially in the playwriting industry, because none of us is making much money. And so you want to be around good people and nice people. And so that came about from a friend of mine saying, hey, do you actually have a short play that I could pass on to them? And I had just finished this particular play, and timing was right, and thankfully they liked it. That's how a lot of that, so much has happened.
Did they require anything from you, like this needs to be changed, or?
Not at all. They liked it as is, which was, and it had production before that, so it, I'd given them a pretty polished piece at that point.
So going back to where I got sidetracked, which still kind of goes with this. What do you write with?
Computer. My laptop. I use Microsoft Word.
Okay.
I don't use. I have Final Draft. When I do screenwriting, I'd use that.
Sure.
I've gotten so quick with my Control E, Control L. Like for all of the centering for formatting. And there's something that. It's what I wrote. I wrote my first play in Microsoft Word, and I've tried using another software that should save me time, and maybe eventually it might, but there's something for me I love about Microsoft Word. I like it. If there's a widow margin, where the character name is on one page and the line is on the next, I use that as a challenge. Sometimes I'm going, okay, can I make another line shorter to get it up there, in a way to not cheat, to cheat it in a way, but I use that just to help me make sure, am I being as succinct as possible, or sure. No, I need to go on to the next page. That's okay. So it makes me think that way. I tend to be just faster. My keyboarding teacher in 6th grade was one of the best teachers I had, because I type very fast.
How do you format with Word then?
Really, I tend to do pretty standard formatting, where character's name is centered and the line of dialogue is then aligned left, and I italicize my thing. But it's just I just do it very quickly. I kind of my shortcuts. Whatever's built into it. Tab is a good friend of mine.
not the cola. So I don't want to beat this dead horse, because I think this is like the fourth time this has been brought up, so people are probably bored of it. I have a really big issue with the way that plays are requested to be formatted, because that's not how they're printed.
Yeah, so the way that they're printed, and I tell this to my students all the time, with the character name, colon, and then line, right, is all about saving money, because you're cutting your page count in half, basically, but it's actually not as actor friendly, I don't think. I say, whenever I'm teaching playwriting, I always tell the playwrights, I said, actors are stupid. As an actor myself, I could say that, and so you want to make it as idiot-proof as possible. And I think that the standard playwriting format, with the character on one line, the character's name on one line and the line on the next, there's something about that on the page. You're less likely to lose your place. So in any kind of reading, it's really just for that reason. I don't think Paula Vogel is fantastic. She talks about how there's, every play doesn't also need to have the same format. I don't use the same font for every single play. I don't use like Wingdings or anything, but
translate it.
Yeah, sometimes I'll use Courier Do, and make it seem like that. But sometimes Ariel or Garamond, you can still clear and readable. But even some plays of mine are more Tracy Jones, for example. I don't use standard paragraphs. So a character may say, I don't know, and then I skip a line and their line continues. But it's for me, that's a way of showing their thought process. And it was just the way that those characters spoke to me. And also the character names are almost aligned left instead of centered. there was something about just the way that play spoke to me that that formatting made more sense. It's still recognizable, and that's the thing I tell my students too. Like, as opposed to script TV film writing, which is a much more strict structure and format. A play, like, if it looks like a play, they'll get it, and yeah.
Have you had anything sent back that wasn't formatted correctly?
No, and if I have, frankly, I don't necessarily want to work with that company. There's a point where, I'm not doing anything funky, but I also think if it's still clear, like Entazaki Shange with For Colored Girls, that play is, a choreo poem. She didn't call a play, but it's structured very differently, and it should be, and because that's how that play looks and sound, because you're trying to capture, formatting is just trying to capture eventually what that play sounds like and should look like. As long as it's something that, because actors are stupid. I think a lot of producers are stupid. In theater companies, where like, but if it, going back to the idea of voice, if this is the way that my play just looks on the page, and you can make an argument for it, the way that John Guare can make an argument for that opening scene, go with that. And if a theater company doesn't want to do it because of that, then you probably shouldn't be working with that theater company. They're not going to do the right production of your play anyway.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever had requested? Did you follow up with it, and then give me a horror story?
Oh God. I try not to talk too much about horror.
You don't have to be specific.
So a general sort of horror story, I'll go to that first, just as the idea, and it's basically taught me to trust my instincts more. And I try to look at, again, I'm optimistic and glass half full kind of person. And so I've had some bad productions of plays of mine, and I can say that never has it been because of, there's something in me that knew that wasn't going right, and I should have trusted that and not been as accommodating. I try not to be a jerk about things, and I think there's a way. I've learned how to stand up for myself because of instances like that where things went, whereas I try to trust the process, and I try to kind of trust like other people, and I want to, and but I think there have been times in the past that I wish that I would have stood up for myself earlier and said something and fought for things a little bit more. Because if bad reviews of plays of mine, like I usually agree with, because I'm like, yeah, I saw that too, and I should have said something. So that, I guess, horror story wise, that, they're the productions that I haven't been directly involved with, where I've sent the play somewhere and I go to see it and going, I don't know this is bizarre. I don't know what is happening with this. One of the first plays that I wrote, early on when I was 15, that first play had a production somewhere, and I'm going, it was called And Jack Came Tumbling After, and it was like a film noir-ish. It was inspired by film noir. I never said that to you.
No, you didn't, and I want to read it now.
Well, I was 15, so give me some. But the premise is it's this woman named Jill who dates people named Jack and gets each Jack to kill the previous Jack, because she's trying to eradicate the world of all the Jacks in the world, because she thinks that Jill shouldn't be coming tumbling after. It's like a feminist anyway. Sure. But I saw a production where they were suddenly, and it's modern, and there's a gun, but they were like in lederhosen, and it was because it was, well, the director said, well, it's Jack and Jill, and I'm going, I don't understand this. I get anyway, so that's not a horror show, but just kind of going, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, that's, I think, and I've learned also over the years to hopefully get my writing as clear as possible, so that no one's going to go fully out off the deep end into some interpretation that doesn't match the play.
But what about requests? Has anybody, like, when you've submitted, they've included something like bizarre, or like, I don't know, there's part of me that I've heard theater companies, or they want to like an essay before submit. I'm like, what does this have to do with it? You know, so I'm just curious if there's
like when I'm like sharing a play, submitting a play, kind of that sort of thing.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, I mean there are times too that, you know, I guess no one's ever asked me as the playwright, like for a production, for anything funky that I can think of. You know, I mean, sometimes they'll. I've you know, a couple times with language or something. If there's one, usually I'm like, that's totally fine. But you know, sometimes for submitting a play, you know, an application will ask for. Again, I can't think of anything at the top of the head, like a specific example, but you know, like you said, like an essay, or you know, like or a statement about like. Sometimes for like, and sometimes if it's a development opportunity, I get that, you know. But there have been times too for, you know, like a 10-minute play festival, you know, write a statement of intent about why this. I'm going like, it's 10 minutes, you know, just do the play.
Exactly, yeah.
And I've over the years either stopped submitting to those places just because I'm going. Yeah. I mean, again, it's trusting. And it's reading the room a little bit and knowing, I know my plays are not right for every theater. Like, I know that. I didn't know that initially. I thought any theater in the world should do my plays, but they shouldn't. Right. And I'm also better now about knowing, yeah, I'm not going to submit to that theater. You know, it's not a good match. You know, I don't need to, I've never been on Tinder, but like, you know, I don't need to swipe right or left or whatever, like for every single theater. You know, there are ones I'm like, I can let them pass.
Sure. So, what are reasons that you choose to submit, and what are reasons that you choose to avoid?
Yeah, usually what the opportunity is. If it's a theater company that I would love to work with, you know, I usually look them up online. If there's an online presence, you know, see what kind of work are they doing. You know, pictures are really helpful to see kind of, oh, okay, this is the quality of what that is. And I'm not trying to be a snob about that, because you know, I think that. Some of the best work that I've ever seen has been at really small, like you call it rinky-dink theater, you know, and that's really exciting. But you can get a sense of personality and kind of how people put themselves across. So, you know, for opportunity that way, if it's a theater company I want to work with, if it's a place I'd like to work, you know, like if there's a city that I'm going, oh, I've never had a production of my play in blah, blah, blah. You know, I may seek that out or get excited about that. For a development opportunity, it's often what are they offering? You know, if it's you know, if they're just doing a reading of my play, but they're requiring me to fly out to them, I'm like, that's not. I don't necessarily need to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just looking at kind of what am I getting out of it, and also I try to think what's the theater getting out of it. What's the audience of this theater? Is my play going to be a good fit for the audiences there as well?
What made you set a play in a wing bar?
I wish I knew. I actually am trying to think when I first chose that. What it was I was I had an idea for a setting that, like, in a completely somewhat in one of these sterile back party rooms that are trying to be festive. You know, any like the stage directions is like akin to like a Chili's or TGI Fridays or you know Applebee's, because the play is about the play Tracy Jones is about. It's a woman named Tracy Jones who it'd be a really bad play if, you know, she wasn't named Tracy Jones.
And we never meet her.
We never meet her. It's Godot. And she has rented out this back party room and is throwing a party to which she's invited every woman in the world named Tracy Jones. And the play starts an hour into the party and no one's there. And it's a play about loneliness, about our need to connect with other people. So I was thinking, well, what kind of place feels like that, and you know, where you would throw a party, you know, because you wouldn't throw a party like in an office park somewhere, you know, which would be the other equivalent. And so for me, those kind of back party rooms, they're so trying to be something that they're really not. And so that felt like a good, not that you're asking, I've never thought about this, but you know, I think a good metaphor for why the play, you know, for the ideas of the play. So
going back to the stage directions,
yeah.
In this regard, how what did those stage directions look like? Is that where you left it, and then you're just like, it's out of my hands at this point? Good luck, scenic designer, and bringing all those antique things that you would see on the wall at TGI Fridays.
Yeah, well, that's actually been literally. I think the stage direction says, quote unquote fun paraphernalia. I think the walls are filled with it, and the two productions so far of the play. It's been such a delight to see those stages, because they and the set designers, I hope, have had a fun time. You're going to Goodwill and garage sales, and because I think we all have a sense of what that is, and when you look at those places, there's also, like, if you really try to do like a deep psychological dive into why they don't make any sense half the time. I mean, sometimes it's like it's neighborhood, but you're like, what is all this?
From somebody who did time at a TGI Fridays, every single one of those items has a history, and there's a reason behind it. Believe it or not, I couldn't tell you what all of them were.
That's great, but that's and I think that's also where that's the thing, the beauty. Like a good set designer, and the set designers for the two productions that have happened so far have been brilliant. Even if you don't know what that is, there's you get a sense of it. Like these things should not belong together, and yet they do. But that's an example in the set and the stage directions. It literally just says fun paraphernalia, and they've gotten it down so far.
Well, that's also brilliant. It's a good example of not overriding stage directions that I think a lot of people hopefully then could go back and
Yeah, because for me it's not. I mean, I had the other stage directions for that. There, it does say music playing from the outside room, and I think I said something that oh gosh, I wish I could quote myself better, but it was that soccer moms and frat kids both enjoy, or something like that, and so and I do say that there's tables of the food, and the play is actually very specific about there's food that's thrown, and there's food gets moved. It's almost like a farce in certain ways. So a lot of that is specified. But
and this is full length, yes?
It's a full length, yeah.
Okay. How many Tracy Jones are in the play? And how do you specify
that? So as far as character names, it's 4 characters in the play. It's Tracy, 2 guests that do come that are named Tracy, but I use their middle names for that to clarify, because there'd be Tracy.
I wasn't sure if it was like Tracy 1, Tracy 2, Tracy 3.
Yeah, and there are things that you learn about them that come up, but in the script it's specified one way. I do actually ask in the program. The program does say Tracy 1, Tracy 2, Tracy 3.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, can you tell us who the 4th character is?
It's the party host with the most.
Isn't that another Tracy?
No, it's the one who's hired, who works at Jones Street Bar and Grill.
Got it.
It's
okay.
The 17-year-old hired to control all this craziness.
Copy. Okay, so what's the biggest piece of advice you give to your students? Besides voice, of course.
Besides voice. I think to remember that you're writing a play, and remember why you've chosen this medium, other than if it's an assignment or it's a required class, you have to write a play. But to think about what is it about that makes it stage worthy? That's the biggest thing that I just keep reminding them.
What did you, by studying playwriting, because I go back and forth about this with this as well, and whether or not it's necessary to study or to get a degree in playwriting. Can you achieve? What are the benefits of going through a program?
Yeah,
of playwriting opposed to just
I think that so when I got my MFA, I got an MFA a lot later than a lot of people, and I talked to them about that. I said, and they asked me this in my interview. I'd had plays produced. I'd been teaching playwriting at that point. But I honestly actually hadn't taken a whole lot of playwriting classes. So the benefit for me was sort of putting a name to some of the things that I either did instinctively or had picked up, and being able to, for me to be able to recognize patterns that I was doing, to be able to have a lens to look at my own writing with that I hadn't given myself before. I think it's made me a better writer, just as far as being able to, I can spot things faster. Whereas in the past, maybe I would have gone down certain roads just because I wasn't, I'm able to avoid certain things now and do certain shortcuts more because of it's awareness. Yeah.
What were some of those things? What were some of those patterns that you were committing that you broke, or that it helped you recognize? Or
I think oftentimes I would have had characters. Eventually, I would have cut certain things. I would have had characters, talk on and on about certain things in a way that it was fun for me, but I had lost sight of kind of why I was writing that. So I think that is a shortcut for me. It just saved me some time in kind of going, and I think that those things can be useful as exercises, as writing things that are not going to be part of the play, but being able to just kind of bring my own awareness to, oh, that's what I'm doing here.
But you just said something that I'm intrigued by. Writing something that's not going to be part of the play. What is that? Yeah, I think
there is a value. I don't do it all the time, but I think there's a value to writing and thinking, definitely thinking, but about what's not going to end up in the play. To definitely, I think about what are these characters' lives? What did they do before? What's their day before? What's happening? The history, things like that aren't going to end up in the play. Oftentimes, when I'm stuck, I will allow myself to write. I'm going, I know that this isn't going to end up here. I'm going to have a conversation between these two characters that, it doesn't feel like it's part of the play to me. I don't think it's going to be. I'm just going to write it so it'll make sense to me. And sometimes it actually goes, oh, that actually should be. Most of the time I'm actually, I was right in trusting that it shouldn't be. But either I've learned something, or it's been a way by giving myself permission to write something that I know is not going to be there, to relax a little bit. So when I do jump back into it or get back, I'm more focused.
What kind of classes are you taking in an MFA program? I mean, in my head, I'm like, Playwriting 1, Playwriting 2, Advanced Playwriting for Dummies or for Geniuses. What's that look like in MFA?
I think it varies program by program. A lot of the classes end up being the workshop model where you're, but some of it is just also the structure of that workshop. For example, even like in, I actually taught for Point Park University for a little bit after I graduated, and one of the classes I taught was the Thesis 2 class, which was rewriting, where they came in with the draft of what they're doing, and each week they'd be turning in 10 more pages, but the lesson of the week would be focused on, okay, we're going to really look at your secondary character at this point. So a lot of what an MFA program, at least the one that I was part of, was looking at kind of what we're talking about, those tools, okay, we're going to use this tool on these pages just to see how that feels. And so the structure that way. But then there were also, I think a lot of MFA programs, you're reading a lot, you're exposed to a lot of things that you would not necessarily be exposed to. You are forced, in a good way, to dissect those plays in a way other than, okay, I'm just, it's a good MFA program will I think that the goal of it is just to teach you how to look at plays and writing for the stage more critically, while also it's a hard thing to do because you're looking at it critically, but it's patting your head and rubbing your tummy, where I have to look at this really critically, but I also have to free and not think about it at the same time.
What's your favorite exercise to give your students?
Changes every year. There's some that I look forward to more than others, but because the way that I teach the students that I have, I'm also teaching them theater history at the same time. One of my favorite things to exercise that I do is to take their own work, but to write it in the style of somebody else, because I think that it teaches two different things. They understand the theater history, they understand the style of somebody else, but it forces them to suddenly recognize their own choices again through somebody else's lens. So I love doing that because it also, they have fun doing it, and it it's really fun for me to see a suddenly, my students, are writing their version of Tennessee Williams, in their stories that don't make any sense with that.
How necessary do you think theater history is?
I think it's important. I think it's important because it, kind of like we were talking about before, you can't really break the rules until you know the rules sometimes, and understanding where other people have come from before, I think is inspiring, and to use it not as, and I think theater history can be taught badly, especially if you're only looking at, one, if you're looking at this is the way to do it, this is the way those people figured out how to do it. But the thing that I love about theater history, especially when you do it kind of like a survey, is that they're all talking to each other. All these plays are, art, that's what art is. Art is looking at, it's a conversation. And I think that's what good, hopefully, theater history will teach you, is that, that Brecht is responding to what's going on at the time. And everything, kind of that's happened since Brecht, when we talk about Brechtian theater, there's lighting elements exposed. And people are going, well, that's what we normally say. Yeah, but that was revolutionary at the time, and to recognize that, Doll's House, I teach Doll's House, but I do teach a lot of the classics because I think it's important to know, they don't get how revolutionary Doll's House was, but there's Maybu Mines has a great production of Doll's House that was filmed, and was all of the men are played. I don't want to be offensive now saying, because I can't remember the right term, but by little people, by little men, and the women are very tall. And it's also a very avant-garde kind of, at the very end, Nora takes off her wig and is naked, and my students are going, what is this? And I say, okay, your response to this is how audiences at the time responded to Doll's House, as going like, this is not how things are. This is not, and to recognize that theater is constantly evolving, and in a conversation, and we're responding. So I think writers that write without having some sense of history, you're writing a little bit in a vacuum, again, steal from them, ignore them, say that is completely not the way that I want to do it, but to recognize that these things happen. It can be a shortcut for you. It can also be a cautionary tale. It could also be, that's the way theater was. I do not want to create theater like that. Awesome, create something even better.
Do you think that you can still perform classical pieces in that traditional sense, like how Doll's House, is, or do you think that to do those pieces they have to be modernized to some extent?
I never read Doll's House until I started teaching it. The first production I ever saw of it was the Broadway revival that Janet McTeer was in the 90s, and it was very, for me, fairly traditional. Though it's great to watch interviews with Janet McTeer talking about how she was not the typical person. She's tall. She's a tall woman, and talking about this is not the Maybu Mines production, but just in her approach to the character. But it was a pretty traditional interpretation of it. I think there's room for that. I think for some productions, I think that there's a lot of. Now we're getting to it's a lot bigger topic, but I think what we think of traditional also. We have a sense of how Shakespeare's plays were originally presented, but if they weren't necessarily done the way we think of the Shakespeare. I think when you're directing a production, when you're choosing to produce a production, it's figuring out, similar to what I was saying about why do we write a play, why this play now, and why am I telling it in this way? I think a very traditional take on it can be hugely effective and hugely impactful. I don't think you need to be reinventing it and putting a concept on top of a concept just to make it fresh.
You said you teach Doll's House. What does that mean?
We read it. we talk. We look at it. The way that I the class that I actually teach with these students is actually it's acting, playwriting, theater history, and kind of talking about all of them together and looking at. So the first scene that they do is actually from Doll's House. So they understand how to break it down from an acting standpoint, but we also look at, okay, well, what is what is Ibsen doing, and how is this play structured? And we talk a little bit about the Aristotelian unities and how it's all in one place. And so we look at some of these things. That's kind of how I teach it, and say, and we look at the history at the time period and what was going on. Why did he write it? We talk about some of his other plays, just to get a sense of kind of like, well, who was he as a writer? What drove him? What excited him? So that's kind of how I teach it.
Okay. Yeah. What are you working on now? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, happy to. In addition to kind of trying to figure out that royalty play that I'm trying to figure out.
Sure.
I have a play called Un Hombre that's a modern day golem story. The golems are the Jewish clay monsters, not the precious Lord of the Rings. That's another golem. And it's a 3-character play about a recently widowed woman who is a sculptor and ends up making a clay man that comes to life and serves as her 12-year-old son's Spanish and bar mitzvah tutor. And it's it sounds like the punchline.
Is it a comedy?
It's a bit of both. It's actually, I mean, it's how it's exploring kind of how do we deal with grief, the idea of what does it mean to be a man. Here's this 12, almost 13-year-old becoming a man at his bar mitzvah, but what does that mean? This clay man that is coming to life, what does that mean to have responsibility? And also the mother is figuring out how is she dealing with her grief, and what does it mean to create, kind of in terms of all of this. Yeah.
Nice. Where can people find your work?
If you go to www.bystephenkaplan, that's B-Y, like written by, STEPHENKAPLAN.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, which you'll get like 3 times a year, which is when I have work coming up, but you can see what's going on and check out my work. You can also get New Play Exchange, where I have a bunch of my plays up there.
Awesome, I like it. Well, Stephen Kaplan, thanks for coming on the Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, really just even to say hi. And be sure to share this video with a playwright, a director, an actor, a scenic designer, anybody in the theater that you think would enjoy this. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And until we see each other again, and in the meantime, keep writing.